Every 90 seconds, someone is reported missing. Many return to their families, but for others, something has gone seriously wrong. A woman visits a solicitor about divorcing her husband. The next day, she disappears.
I thought it was just kind of like, I've had enough. I don't want anything more to do with you guys.
A mother is missing, and then yet another devastating blow.
Police came to my house and they said, I'm really sorry to tell you, we've got some bad news and that your father is missing at sea.
What happens in the police investigation that follows?
In any other murder inquiry, you've got a body. We didn't have a body.
To prove that someone's dead with no body and no paper trail, literally zero evidence whatsoever, is damn near impossible.
What happens to the family at its heart?
I never knew that there were such depths of sadness that you're capable of actually going through.
When missing turns to murder.
My mother, she was quite an introverted person. My father is the complete opposite. A lot more gregarious, a lot more controlling, a lot more the orchestrator of as to how he wanted things to be in the house, what he wanted to do. I can remember reading Ladybird books. My father teaching me times tables and testing me every single night. He'd handwritten out all of my times tables. We'd go to the New Forest Sunday after lunch with the dog for a nice walk, playing frisbee in the park, or when we were abroad and then you then had other games, swimming a huge amount, skiing a huge amount, chasing each other down the mountains in Canada.
So my grandfather was very much described as someone that was very, very driven, strong-willed, strong-minded.
Russell worked as a draftsman, electronics draftsman in the aviation industry. They travelled a lot, they worked abroad. It was quite lucrative.
It was a privileged upbringing to a certain degree. They lived all over the world.
But at the heart of what seems to be perfectly normal family life is a worrying character.
He was very, very ruthless. He would cut you down as quickly as he could.
Well, it had been obvious to Carol's parents that Russell was a controlling, unpleasant character right from the beginning. Carol left school at 15 and met Russell at a factory in Reading. Carol was head over heels in love, and despite the fact that her parents detested him, they ended up getting married. He caused a lot of arguments, and the rest of the family didn't like him. Carol's mother, Mary, found out that he had a conviction for grievous bodily harm. Russell didn't want his wife to have anything to do with her parents after that.
Carol doesn't see or speak to her parents for years, during which time she has her daughter Sam. Then, out of the blue, Carol calls her mother.
Carol said that they were living in Southampton at that stage. They had an Alsatian puppy. They'd been at work and then came home and the puppy had made a mess or ripped something up. Russell completely lost it and beat up his wife. He kicked the puppy to death. Carol's mother wanted Carol to just leave. She begged her to leave, and she wouldn't. He seemed to have control over Carol.
Russell's control isn't just over Carol.
Very much do as I say, not as I do, and that was very much how my grandfather brought up my mum.
I was heavily disciplined from a very, very young age. A wooden spoon across my backside, a wooden coat hanger, or being put into isolation for days and literally not spoken to, food brought to my room. But my father was definitely, he was the one who meted out the punishment. When I was 14, we came back from Canada for the final time.
With the family back in the UK, Russell sets up a new business.
Patricia started to work for my father in 1983. The business was now being run from, effectively, our kitchen dining room table. Financially, things weren't going absolutely great.
Russell has an unconventional solution to his money problems.
The idea was that Patricia would sell her flat. She then injected some cash to my parents to enable them to be able to pay off some arrears on the mortgage that were obviously in place, so that they could actually save the house, so that they didn't lose the house. Within a matter of months, Patricia was then living in our house. She was completely the opposite to what my mother was. She was very confident. I don't think my mother was particularly overly welcoming, you know. She obviously switched on a few buttons with regards to my father, completely. It just gave my father, basically, he brought his lover into the house. You have to bear in mind just how much that if my father wanted something, how much my father, that was it, that's what was happening.
Russell continued this affair under the roof of the family home.
It was so disrespectful.
Family life is now increasingly strained.
Bad things were starting to happen in the house as far as rows were concerned, as far as my mother's mental stability and how she was starting to cope with the reality of having Patricia in the house. As to how much she was aware of how much the affair was going on, I don't know. That wouldn't have been something that she would have discussed with me.
Sam decides to share a secret with her mother.
And I said to her, you do know that this isn't the first time that this has happened. I know that he's done this before, Mummy. I said to her, don't tell my father. Unfortunately, my phone call that evening was from my father to say to me, just you wait, until I get home. I was petrified. He comes in, opens up the door, comes straight up the stairs, comes straight into my room, turns my light on, had a hard-soled leather slipper, takes me out of bed, puts me over his knee, and literally just starts beating me. I'm screaming, I'm crying. He throws me to the other side of the room, to the base of where the bed, and I had some wardrobes. This arm here was literally absolutely battered, black and blue. I'll never forget it. I was so scared.
It's 1985, and Carol and Russell's relationship is at breaking point.
She was living under the same roof as her husband and his mistress.
As far as my mother was concerned, this was now irretrievably broken down. She was about to turn 40. Life begins at 40 is the old saying. You watch this space. I'm going places now and I'm getting out of this.
She saw a solicitor and talked to him about a divorce, because her life by then must have been intolerable.
She had obviously herself started then to make the normal inquiries that you normally would to normally start to dissolve the marriage and to split up the assets that the house had, because I'm going to divorce you.
It's the day after Carol visited a solicitor to discuss divorce proceedings.
My father and I went to London. I don't know if I expected my mother to be there when we got back, because when I walked into the kitchen, there was a note on the side by the back door from the kitchen, handwritten, very short, just saying that she's had enough, that she's leaving, and that she doesn't want anything more to do with us, with her wedding ring just sat on top of the note. And then obviously then I was quite concerned, because I think that because the way that I then ran upstairs, because I wanted to know how gone was gone. I can remember walking into the master bedroom and all the wardrobe doors were all wide open and nothing had been taken. And looking back at my father, who was now stood in front of me, just leaning against the door, and he said, "Shall we back?" I didn't think when she went missing that meant missing.
A lot of adults go missing for various reasons, and the majority of them are found safe and well.
My mother wasn't reported missing straight away. There was nothing untoward or nothing that we had to be concerned about mental health-wise. People do go missing, and that sometimes they go missing with the full intention of not ever wanting to be found. And I went to the police station, to Bournemouth Police Station, with my father. I can remember us taking a photograph with us.
At that stage, it would then be assessed, and then inquiries would then be made, places that they may have gone, friends that they'd know about, etc., and it would move from there.
But Russell, as always, had an explanation. Russell told a few people that his wife had left.
It was as if she wasn't missing. It was as if nothing had happened and that everything just continued as you were. So therefore, nothing particularly was going to be done about actually looking for her.
Patricia and Russell continued living together in it, and they also had Sam living there, but things became increasingly strained between Sam and her father.
One evening, sat at the dining room table, my father says, "I don't think I want you to live in the house anymore." And I said, "Okay." And I got up, went upstairs, went and got my coat. Patricia's at the bottom of the stairs, and she's doing her dramatic of, "Oh, Sammy, please don't go. Please don't leave like your mother did." I can remember walking down the drive. My father stood up at the door. He said to me, "You'll be back." And I said to him, "Your wife has left you. Your daughter's now leaving you. And hopefully one day she'll see sense. She'll leave you as well. And then you'll end up as a sad, lonely old man." I've got this big, massive blue suitcase, my school bag over my shoulder, teddy bear with me that I'd had ever since I was a baby.
And she was effectively homeless. I believe she slept under the pier in Bournemouth for a while.
How I actually managed to stay alive, I do not know. I did wonder where she'd gone, but I think, though, from the time of when I left home, I just started to go off the rails, didn't speak to my father at all, didn't speak to Patricia at all, because that was completely broken now.
Two years pass before Sam contacts her father to ask if he's heard anything from her mother.
He said that yes, he had.
A lady giving details of Carol Packman had gone into Bournemouth Police Station to say words to the effect that, "I understand you've got me down as a missing person. I just want to say I'm safe and well, but I don't want my family or friends or anybody to contact me."
And I believed that. My impression was that this was literally just a temporary thing, that she would come back. She would turn up one day.
With Carol no longer in the family home, Russell's relationship with Patricia is able to flourish.
They were a fully fledged couple. There was no stopping them now, because they could openly just say, well, it is Russell and Patricia now, not Russell and Carol anymore.
They lived in a very nice house. They had nice things, and they spent a lot of money that they probably didn't have.
It appears everything's going well for Russell and new girlfriend Patricia, but things take an unexpected turn when the couple head out on a boat trip with their solicitor.
I came on duty as the shift sergeant at 6 a.m. on the 21st of October and was told by the duty inspector that there was a person reported missing at sea, having gone overboard from a yacht which was on charter from the south coast of England. And so I was asked to commence inquiries into that.
Russell Causley had somehow gone overboard this yacht in the middle of the night, and his solicitor, who was on board, Anthony Hackett-Jones, made a mayday call.
When somebody goes missing on land, it's fairly straightforward in that you would work on information where they were last seen, places that they frequent, and any other information that you get from family or relatives. Whereas at sea, it's slightly more complicated because you need to have a position where they were last known and then work that with tide and wind and calculate then what direction of travel they may be if they are floating in the sea. The lifeboats and fishing vessels all were called in to help search for Russell. The air search aircraft was also scrambled, and that carried out the search as well.
Initial searchers find no trace of Russell.
One of the first things to do in these investigations is to make contact with next of kin, and I found out that that was Sam.
Police came to my house and they said, "I'm really sorry to tell you, but we've got some bad news and your father is missing at sea." Completely broke down.
Her father was missing at sea, presumed dead by this stage, and of course that was a great shock to her.
I said to him, "We need to find my mother. We've got to find my mother and we've got to tell her what has happened to her husband, because my father was now dead."
It's now been 8.5 years since anyone's had contact with Carol.
Sam had told me that her mother, she believed her mother, had started a new life somewhere else in the world. And so I then started to make inquiries to trace her, starting with the UK, passport office, doctor's surgeries, the usual sort of places that you might expect to find a record. No trace in the UK. And then various other places around the world where she'd worked previously, such as Canada, Germany. And I just couldn't believe that a mother wouldn't make contact with her daughter over the years that followed her disappearance.
The press are quickly onto the story.
I was working as a reporter in the town centre in Bournemouth. It was just an ordinary day, and you never know what the news is going to throw up. But we had a report of this local man who'd gone missing in the Channel Islands and was presumed drowned. He'd gone off a yacht. So my news editor sent me around to his house to try and talk to his wife, or widow as we thought she was. Her reactions were like none I'd ever seen before for somebody in that situation. She didn't behave normally. So that alerted my suspicions. This woman that I'd been to see actually wasn't Russell's wife. And this is when we found out that nobody had actually seen or heard from Carol since 1985. My gut instinct as a reporter was there was something abnormal about the whole thing.
Russell's solicitor Anthony and Russell's girlfriend Patricia appear to be acting suspiciously, meaning things aren't stacking up for Guernsey police either.
Anthony and Patricia were regularly contacting me, wanting me to wrap up the investigation. Despite being under pressure, I told Anthony that it could take months before a body could materialise. The increased pressure was really heightening my suspicions that a crime had been committed, but I wasn't sure whether it was Russell being pushed overboard or whether it was a large fraud, or that he faked his own death. After they returned to England, I then put the insurance companies on notice. I wanted to know if there was any life cover on Russell, and within a matter of days, Anthony had made a claim on Russell's life in somewhere in the region of £1 million. Working on that assumption, I then carried out inquiries with the local ferry that runs between the Channel Islands and the mainland UK, and I was able to find out that on the night that the Le Talon Noir left Guernsey, that at roughly the same time, a Mr. R. Russell had booked a ticket to travel back on the ferry back to the UK.
My father was missing, presumed dead, for 4 months. And I was desperate, really, really desperate to find my mother.
The police investigation is gathering pace, and Sergeant Phil Fallar decides to interview Patricia again.
I asked Patricia why she mentioned in her statement that she'd made that she was the wife of Russell, when I knew now that Carol was actually his wife. And I particularly wanted to know from Patricia if she might have any idea where I could find Carol, because I needed to speak with her about this incident. And then she said to me and looked me directly in the eye and said, "Sergeant Fallar, I don't think you will ever find Carol," which sent a shiver down my spine.
The police are becoming more and more suspicious that Russell may not be lost at sea.
At some point during the investigation, surveillance was put on Patricia in the hope that at some stage she would lead the investigators to Russell Causley.
So after those months of everybody thinking he might be dead, he was found alive and well, having lunch with his girlfriend.
And officers were called and arrested both of them. I'd investigated a number of missing persons reports, but this was the first one that I dealt with where somebody had faked their own death for an insurance claim.
I didn't believe that my father could actually do that sort of thing, and to completely dismiss my feelings as to what effect that would have.
Sam's father Russell, his girlfriend Patricia, and his solicitor Anthony now face a trial for insurance fraud, but the whereabouts of Russell's wife Carol remains a mystery.
Patricia Causley pleaded guilty to the conspiracy to defraud, and she was given a suspended sentence.
Anthony pleaded not guilty. He went to trial and he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment because he pleaded not guilty and the fact that he was a solicitor. Following Russell's arrest, he pleaded guilty to fraud and was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment.
For the police and Carol's family, there are still questions to be answered.
If he was capable of lying to his daughter about that, then he's capable of lying to her about the disappearance of his wife. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Because this was a lady who was a person of habit, and all of a sudden, from June 1985, everything had stopped.
You then think to yourself, is there the possibility that actually something really bad has happened and we had no idea?
Alarm bells were starting to ring because we were not getting a consistent story. Everybody we spoke to was giving us a different story, and bearing in mind, these stories had come from Russell. He was the focal point of this inquiry.
DC Paul Donnell had already interviewed Russell and Patricia before they were convicted of fraud.
The first question I asked him, I just said, right, I want to explain to you first of all the reason why we're here. It's not usual for CID officers to be investigating a missing person. We've come to you for help to try and trace your wife, and then we can put this matter to bed, and then we won't need to bother you any further. And he sort of went, well, yeah, she's gone to Canada. Well, how do you know she's gone to Canada? Well, I got a phone call from her. And I said, well, have you received anything else from her? Yes, I got a letter from her in '91. Great. Can we see the letter? No, I've destroyed it. I think if it was me, I'd want to keep something to show the authorities that this is what had happened. I then turned to Patricia, who was there listening to all of this, and I said, well, okay, that's fine. I said, right, Patricia, and he interrupted, and he said, well, she can't help you with anything. And I said, well, actually, we'll be the judge of that, and we want to ask her some questions because she was there, and we'd like her to answer those, not you. And he said, well, no, I'm not happy with that. You know, she's got nothing to say. That in itself was very unusual.
For daughter Sam and her family, their fears and concerns are reaching new heights. Where is Carol?
The person that you think is dead is now alive, and the person that you think is missing, it's not looking good as far as initial traces trying to find her. But it's really not easy. It tears people apart. It literally just breaks you.
For the police, though, everything is becoming clear.
After a year of looking for Carol and not finding any trace of her, for me, that moved from being a missing person inquiry to a murder inquiry.
Carol Packman hasn't been seen since the 15th of June 1985. Police now believe they're investigating her murder.
We're now in a situation, having interviewed both Russell and Patricia, this is no longer a missing person inquiry, it's a murder inquiry, and what we've got to do is prove it. Russell was serving a sentence. He'd now been convicted of the fraud, and he was serving 2 years imprisonment for that fraud.
Russell has lied about faking his own death, and the police also think he's lying about what's happened to his wife.
You start to realise just the tone of the investigation that it's now going into. But of course, this is now 8.5 years on, and you have no idea of the length of the road that's ahead of you.
I can't begin to think what Sam was going through. It was so stressful. I really felt for her.
We believed that we could still find a body, and as a result of what the prisoner had told us at the time, we made extensive inquiries and searches in the New Forest, storm drains, etc. there. We also got the help of a forensic archaeologist to do some work in a local cemetery, because information came to us that he may well have placed her in a new grave in that area.
For the time being, though, the police face an uphill struggle.
All we had was circumstantial evidence. We didn't have the body. We knew that we needed to build a case good enough for us to arrest him, so that means we had to have reasonable suspicion that he'd been involved in her death. So that's what we set about doing.
They spoke to people in Germany and Canada, all over the place.
We took witness statements from all the neighbours, the friends and the work colleagues that we could.
There's kind of pattern emerged that Russell had been telling all these different versions of what had happened to Carol.
It was like a jigsaw that gradually built up and built up and built up to satisfy ourselves in our own mind that she was no longer alive.
Russell was completely arrogant. He thought the police didn't have anything on him. I think he thought he was untouchable.
Things are starting to unravel for Russell.
We were contacted by a prisoner who stated Causley had had many conversations with him about how he got rid of his wife. We also received another phone call from a guy saying that he'd been a cellmate of Russell Causley's, and he was saying that one day Russell asked him, if I was going to get rid of a body, what do you think would be the best way to do it? And he then said that he admitted to killing his wife.
This is the break the police need to make their move on Russell.
Myself and my work colleague went to Dorchester Prison because our intention is to arrest him, take him out of their custody, he'll be then in the police custody, and to interview him on suspicion of murder. And we were stood in a corridor waiting, and he was being brought through from the actual prison area itself, and the prison officers were bringing him through. Now, in a situation like this, under normal circumstances, any prisoner especially a convicted prisoner, has the right not to speak to the police. He's told that the police are here to speak to him, and if he decides he doesn't want to speak to them, he doesn't have to do it. But on this occasion, that was different because we were going to arrest him. He didn't know that. And as he's being brought down the corridor, I could see down the corridor, and he turned to the prison officer and he said, well, I don't want to speak to these guys. And the prison officer says, well, you haven't got any choice on this occasion, Causley. Go up there. And I think the realisation hit him then, because as he was walking towards us, you could see the colour drain from him, and it was the first time that we'd seen any reaction from him. And I arrested him on suspicion of murder, and we took him to Bournemouth Police Station.
Paul and his colleagues also need to speak to Russell's girlfriend.
Patricia was given an opportunity and came forward with nothing.
Patricia's not talking to anybody.
The CPS decided that there was not enough evidence against Patricia to proceed against her.
With Patricia out of the frame, all eyes are on Russell, who's been arrested for Carol's murder.
You know, for you then to realise after all of that time that actually now that somebody was now going to be charged with the murder.
The police are now able to take their next step.
Russell had been charged with the murder of Carol.
I know every stage so intricately well, but I've never met her, and she feels like such a stranger to me. That hurts me. It upsets me my grandfather threw it all away. Why did he throw it all away? He had everything that most people dream of.
Despite Russell being charged, everyone knows this case isn't going to be easy.
In any other murder inquiry, you've got a body. We didn't have a body.
To prove that someone's dead with no body and no paper trail, literally zero evidence whatsoever, is damn near impossible.
My mother had now been missing for 11.5 years. I've now got a person who has the capability to be able to tell me where she is. But that person won't speak to you. That person just remains just utterly silent.
We wanted to get him convicted because we believed he killed his wife. On the eve of the trial, December '96, we're obviously feeling a little bit concerned that this could fail.
Without Carol's body and any associated forensics, the outcome of this trial is far from a foregone conclusion.
Russell was denying that he'd had anything to do with Carol's disappearance or with the alleged murder.
The challenges of prosecuting without a body are monumental because the body is the main source of evidence, i.e. scene-wise and forensically, that you'll always have in a murder inquiry.
A guilty verdict with no body is going to be very difficult.
So right from the outset, we had to make it clear to everybody concerned, the jury, the judge, everybody, that we did not have any forensic evidence and that we were going to try to convince them that he killed her through his demeanour and the circumstantial evidence that we gathered. It was a mammoth challenge.
Causley's trial lasts 3.5 weeks, during which the jury hear that Carol's body has never been found and there's no forensic evidence. The case rests largely on testimony from prisoners who Causley allegedly confessed to. Finally, the jury are ready to give their verdict.
This was now obviously the crucial time, and we didn't know what to think really. And 2 hours later, which we were very surprised at, we all got called back in.
Russell was convicted of murder despite the lack of any material evidence.
Russell's reaction to it was he actually went to sit down, his legs went from underneath him, and when he got convicted, I don't think he could quite believe it.
It sounds terrible, but it was almost the euphoria at the end of it that we'd actually succeeded, that he was found guilty.
Despite the lack of Carol's body, Russell is finally brought to justice. He's sentenced to life with a minimum of 16 years. It's an investigation, helped by an extraordinary sequence of events.
Looking back on it, I think to myself, well, had I not have investigated the original fraud, this might not have ever led to Russell being convicted of the murder of Carol.
Now, Sam had to get her head round the fact that A, her mother was dead in law, and B, her father had just been convicted of her mother's murder.
Russell's not going down without a fight.
Appeal processes went forward after that, as we expected because of the nature of the actual trial and the fact that we'd had to use convicted criminals as evidence and witnesses.
To make us go through that all over again, all of that emotional trauma again, all that fear again, having to give evidence again. If I hadn't suffered enough, why was it correct then to then put me through that again?
He still has control over Sam's life.
Sam and her family's ordeal continues. In 2003, Russell's conviction is quashed.
In 2004, there was a second trial at Exeter Crown Court, and again, Russell was convicted of the murder.
We were the first people to convict someone twice of murder with no body.
He was then sent back to prison to then continue his original sentence, which was life, with a minimum term of 16 years.
Russell's imprisonment isn't the end of the story. Sam still doesn't know what happened to her mother, or where her body is.
You always do hope that one day you will actually get the knock at the door. They will say, we have found some credible remains.
The one person that could end all of this is Russell.
I personally would be very surprised if Russell Causley ever says anything about it. That's the type of guy he is.
Do I hope that he will ever tell me? Of course I do. Do I think he will? No.
You never get closure if you haven't got the remains of the loved one that's missing, because you still think at some stage they're out there somewhere, or their remains are there somewhere waiting to be found, and it's just not happened.
There's lots of things that will remind you, and different things. It's a different type of grief to somebody dying.
You're never free of it. Birthdays, Christmas, family occasions. Sam must be thinking about that all the time.
What her father has put her through is nothing short of torture. It has overshadowed her son Neil's life as well.
Neil's just been absolutely paramount for me. But it's tested us as well at times. But I think, though, that it's fortunate that we have the relationship that we do. This isn't his problem, but this has affected his life hugely. And unfortunately, it's always been there in the background from the age of almost 4.
It is difficult. And if we could close this book, the rest of our lives would be so much easier.
This has been a huge thing for Neil to actually cope with himself from a very young age. But he's my biggest supporter. He's got my back, absolutely, 110%. I love Neil to bits.
We've been through enough tragedy and enough upset over the last 3 decades that I think we can just about cope with anything that was being thrown at us.
Sam and her family also faced the reality that Russell could be released from prison.
In August 2014, we had my father's first proper oral parole hearing. I've been completely against the fact that my father should be released and should be considered for parole until he actually tells us what he did with my mother and shows some sort of form of rehabilitation by actually acknowledging the harm and the distress that he's caused, is that he should stay where he is. I still think that he's a danger to society. Come on, help me find her. I still maintain to this day that justice has not been fully served on behalf of my mother.
Well, Sam has never been free of it. She's never been free of it since her mum disappeared. I mean, it's horrendous. And she still hasn't got closure, because at the end of the day, all it's done is reaffirm the conviction of her father for murder, but her mother's remains have never been found.
Like nothing else can shape your life, but I'll never ever allow you to break me.
I think that emotionally, in terms of the turmoil that you go through, is that there is no end. You can't turn the page of that chapter and go, you know what, I've put that book down now, I've finished it, I understand what happened, and I can slowly adjust and come to terms and come to grips with that and, you know, and accept it, come to that acceptance point. We don't have any of that, so for us, it's constantly evolving. The story just gets worse and worse, and as it gets worse and worse, it twists and twists more.
I have tried so hard just to say sorry to my mother. I'm sorry. I don't know what else I could do for you. I don't know. I don't know. I've just tried so hard.